This video marks the first in a new series that's a little bit different from what we've done in the past. What's happened with this channel is that we end up making big videos that are 15 to 25 minutes long, and that's great, and it seems like everybody wants that format, but those videos take a long time to make. It's also left a bit of a gap where we end up covering really big projects, or at least slices of a big project, but there are tons of smaller projects that often don't quite fit in. It also makes it difficult to follow up on other projects when they're not part of a big series. So what we're starting here is a mini-series of mini episodes covering smaller projects or things that just don't quite fit in elsewhere. In this first mini episode, we'll take a look at a few of the side projects we've done in the past and see how everything is going. And first up is our Excel pressure washer. In a previous video, we broke the pump on this pressure washer and then replaced it with a newer one. We replaced the pump at the end of 2018 and have made a few small modifications since then. Based on information provided by some of you in the comments as well as reading done elsewhere, we ended up replacing the oil inside the pump with 30 weight. Basically, the consensus is that these cheap Chinese water pumps are pretty good, but the oil they ship with is pretty trash. And the people that have used a lot of these units end up recommending 30 weight non-detergent oil as a good replacement. The old oil looks a tad metallic and there wasn't really much in there, and I have no idea how much this is supposed to take, so we'll just kinda eyeball it and guess. The easiest way to drain the oil was just to unbolt the pump, so while it was apart, we were also able to take a look at our custom key. Most of that smear you're seeing here is the anti-seize we put on the key, but it does have a little bit of a line in it, so it must be a little bit loose. Using a piece of key stock would definitely be the right way to do this, but we'll just throw it back in there since the crank and the pump still look perfect. We'll also take the stock breather cap and make a little modification to it. This red cylinder screws straight into the top of the crankcase and is entirely open through the center, so when the little yellow cap is removed, the oil in the pump is completely open to the air. For something that's going to be used outside where water is involved and dirt will probably be sprayed around, I don't really like that. What we ended up doing was taking a spare piece of brake line, drilling the hole in the top of the cap a bit larger, and epoxying the brake line to it. This allows us to attach a remote breather hose and vent cap, which should help keep the system clean. Just like changing out the oil in the pump, part of this idea came from the suggestion from a comment. Since making these modifications, the pressure washer has only been used a few times, but it seems to be working great. In another project video, we replaced a bearing and a DeWalt grinder. The old bearing had failed pretty badly and completely locked up the motor. In the video, we replaced the bearing and got the grinder working again, and it does still work, but it's not quite right. It spins a little more slowly than it should, and it feels like it generates a lot of heat in the body of the grinder. I tried different grease for the gears, and even running it briefly with no grease to see if that was related, but it made no difference. I suspect the problem is the plastic housing that the bearing we replaced sits in. Since the old bearing was failing for a while, it was able to get pretty hot and actually melted a bit of the plastic around it. So what I think is happening is the new bearing fits a little bit loosely in that housing, which is allowing the rotor to walk around a little bit, and that's making a whole lot of friction. Unfortunately, I don't really have anything else to say about this project. I've thought about putting some epoxy around the bearing and bolting the housing back together to make it really solid, but I'm not really sure how to make sure it's centered in the body of the tool. Maybe just having it be stationary would be enough, I don't know. I haven't tried this fix yet, but it's something I would like to try in the future. And a third project we'll follow up on is the Murray tractor that we replaced the blade spindles on. It was long overdue for some basic maintenance. When we cleaned off and removed the drain, there was maybe like 1/4 of a liter of oil in there. The oil hadn't been changed, or even checked, in quite a few years. I'm actually pretty impressed with this little engine that doesn't even have an oil filter. Surprisingly, the spark plug looked good, but the air filter was pretty gross. Luckily, the paper element filter was pretty okay, and it was just the foam filter that was really nasty. We were able to just wash that out in the sink, and everything is looking good. And while we were at it, we also replaced the fuel filter. The battery's also not doing so hot, so we'll have to get a new one. The engine, while otherwise running well, is also surging pretty dramatically. It runs well enough that it seems to cut the grass just fine, but we'll look into this in the future. Most likely there's a passage clogged in the carburetor and we'll have to clear that out. And that ends the first video of our mini projects series. In all likelihood, most videos in this series will be shorter than this one and feature smaller projects. But I think this series can be useful for other bits of video that just don't really fall in anywhere else.